2 taon na tayo sa pandemya. Sa nakaraang 2 taon, nakaranas na tayo ng maraming sakit. Sakit sa katawan, sakit sa puso, sakit sa sikmura, sakit sa lipunan.
Dear listeners, our public consciousness is afflicted by a disease of misinformation and disinformation. May tracker sa bakuna? May saysay ba ang ivermectin?
Knowledge is power, and we have a friend here who's pretty generous with theirs.
Kabataan, it's now time. Now, Youth Talk. How do I reconcile my loved one's political
How do we
differences?
campaign in a
How do
pandemic?
we engage our candidates?
How do we
What
talk to
if
our
I
community?
don't like my elected officials?
How do you respond to respect my opinion?
It is now time for the voice of the youth to be heard. Now, Youth Talk.
Kabataan ang maririnig, katotohanan ang mananaig. Oras na tayo na, boto mo'y mahalaga. Kung hindi ngayon kikilos, kailan pa ba?
Magandang araw, hapon, o nasa naman kayo ngayon sa ating temporal plane. This is Migo together with ZanD hosting this very special episode of Now Youth Talk 2022's most important conversations discussed.
Yes, time check naman tayo dyan. It's now time for the voice of the youth to be heard. 40 million members of the youth are set to vote on May 9th, 2022. Whether or not you are part of that demographic, this election is, with no exaggeration, the defining moment of our generation.
Tamang-tama ka dyan, ZanD. So now, guys, join us in these critical election months as we go through a mind-boggling list of 2022's most important conversations. We're here to hear you out. Now, Youth Talk. Each episode, we read out a letter from our audiences and think of it as a conversation playing out in your head. So you'll be ready to know what to say when you encounter these in real life.
That's actually very exciting because for these special episodes, we're flipping the script with a special letter sender. Yes, dear viewers, at this critical time and we have to make the most critical decision of our upcoming 6 years, sadyang hindi na mapakali ang ating mga letter senders sa nakikita niyang disinformation sa larangan ng social media at mga chikahan in real life. So, interesting to kasi for you, Migo, what is the most significant piece of disinformation that you've ever encountered?
Alam mo, ZanD, sobrang dami ko nang parang narinig na fake news. Pero siguro ang pinaka significant or probably pinaka madalas ko nakikita is yung namatay na si Mr. Bean. I see it everywhere. Probably even every year. And it's so funny kasi I'm scared what if the time does come and hindi na tayo maniwala lahat, right?
Parang The Boy Who Cried Wolf.
The Boy Who Cried Wolf?
Yeah, like, when, you don't believe now when something is...
Right? Yeah. Hirap na talaga paniwalaan, especially with all the disinformation that we encounter, especially in social media these days, right? So, we've talked about in the previous episode how we should deal with trolls, diba? As well as how to deal with historical distortion, but that was only what we consider a dip into the ocean of disinformation, making crashing waves that disrupt our youth wave of change. Ika nga, that was only the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, kaya siyasatin natin, kilatisin natin at saliksikin natin. Let's look into the deep and rotten roots of disinformation and let's learn how to address it together. Tara! The library is open. Our letter sender is eager for us to hear the truth. Let's just put something to put us in the mood.
All right. So our letters in this series come from a mysterious Katkat. Diba? Parang KitKat. So from Katkat. So Not to be confused with our previous guest who is a student from a Lumad school, our friend has a lot to say about the state of information in the country. So here's the gist. We don't know that much about her, but she says all will be revealed in due time.
Ay, gusto ko to. You know, she's
Ay,
mysterious, she's captivating, and she's here to shed light on the truth. Kasama ni Katkat, alamin natin ang katotohanan tinatago ng kasinungalingan.
ayan. So sa ating mga listeners dyan, send your letters to us kasi we love mail. So bukas na bukas ang ating online mailbox at secretariat.nyv@gmail.com. Sumali sa ating tsikahan at isa-isahin natin ang mga dapat pag-usapan ngayong 2022.
Alright, ready na ba tayo, Migo? Are you ready? I'm ready.
I'm ready,
I'm
Zandy. So
ready.
now, yan, let
Let's
us
start.
begin. Let's begin transmission. We have Katkat's first letter right here. Ayan. So, according to Katkat, COVID-19 is here. The end is near. End agad, di ba? So, this was predicted in the end times by the book of Revelation. And now it is here. For the non-believers, convert now. For the believers, ask for forgiveness wholeheartedly. Whatever you do, don't get the chip. Don't get the vaccine. CTTO. Alam mo, Zandy, si Miss Katkat natin, medyo nagulat ako sinabi niya, pero alam mo yun, meron pa siyang pa-CTTO sa dulo. Parang, sino ba yung credits to the owner niya na yan? Baka mamaya komedyante pala yung nagsabi niyan, di ba? Wala man lang siyang proper sources, right?
Oo nga, naghihirap nga tayo minsan maghanap ng mga MLA, APA, Chicago, Miss Katkat, you know, we'd appreciate it also kung may Chicago tayo dyan, MLA. Wait, I just wanna ask, Migo, ano nga bang favorite mong way to cite your sources
Ay,
for
ako,
research?
favorite ko lagi as APA. Ever since I was in high school, yun na yung ginagamit namin eh, yung APA. So nakalakihan na siya, and when researching, that's also what's required of us. So always APA. How about you, Zandy?
Same, APA rin kinalakihan ko. Pero just recently, alam ko Chicago kasi may pages eh. So, nahanap ko kung saan yung page pag,
Yeah.
ayan. Kaya, well, you know, yung CTTO na quotation na to, medyo, you see this everywhere on the internet, right? CTTO.
Yeah.
Ayan. So, sabi nga ni Katkat, let's continue with what Katkat says. Sabi niya, totoo ba? We survived the Y2K and December 12, 2012 doomsday predictions. Coronavirus na ba ang tunay na wawakas sa sanlibutan? Pero teka, mapavirus, bagyo, lindol, asteroid of 5G networks. Why are humans so obsessed with the end of the world nga ba?
Napansin ko din.
Oo nga. We're like so scared. There's a daming movies, right? A daming films about the
Right.
end of the
Yeah.
world. Yeah, and we always have like Nostradamus, you know, we always have that. So ikaw Migo, what is your favorite doomsday theory? What favorite? Ano nga ba?
Ay,
Yung pinaka narinig mo?
ako, favorite ko talaga dyan yung December 12, 2012. Kasi may movie pa yun eh, di ba? And sobrang
Yeah.
scary ng movie. Talagang yung lupa talagang tumataas, and then there were so much tsunamis. Hindi ko nga alam kung paano pa nagkaroon ng survivors doon. So, nung papalapit ng December 12, 2012, I remember I was in the 6th grade. Sobrang kinakabahan ako noon. Parang I was preparing myself for the end. And nung after that day, ay talagang ang laki yun, talagang nawala yung bigat sa dibdib ko kasi yes, I'm
Yeah.
still alive, right?
I remember that also, and I would tell my parents kasi uso before na kailangan may may maliit na room ka sa bahay na may extra food and all
Yeah.
that. So yung papalapit na yung 2012, you know, I would hide all of the canned goods that we'd have. But same for me because that's like my favorite, and I remember the scene with the tsunami that truly
Yeah.
scared me talaga. Yeah.
Sobrang lala nun eh. Pero so at least 'di ba, hindi natin alam na hindi din pala totoo yun. It was just a theory, and now we're here. We're talking about this. We're reading Kat's letter, and now we're
10
gonna get
years
to know
after.
more. Yeah, 10
Yeah.
years after, right? So, ayun, after all that, of course, it's all fun and games. But now, let's proceed to the further.
Before we move on to that pala, I missed out on something kanina. I just wanna roll back to it because we talked about our favorite doomsday
Yeah.
apocalyptic backgrounds, right? And you know what? There's literature on it, explaining the rise in the early 2010s, and it's because of partly as a result of the 2008 economic recession. And this is from a study by Gwendolyn Audrey Foster. Please humor me to our viewers. I just really think this is very interesting. Right? Oh, it's just very interesting because we see here how economics influences society and culture, and the crisis generated a subculture of humans, doomsday preppers, alongside a swath of new contributions to the apocalyptic genre in both literature and media. This comes as a conjecture, but this culture likely evolved to the disinformation we are familiar with today. This is very interesting, no? Because it's like a butterfly
Yeah.
effect. Like it's
Mm-mm.
leading into what we have now, 10 years after 2012, and this is not to discredit, the years of conspiracy theories that have plagued our airwaves since time immemorial. I just think that's very interesting.
To the further na message ni Katkat sa atin. So, Katkat also said, is this our way of coping, yung doomsday? Gets naman, COVID has been hard on all of us, except for the Villiers, di ba? Kasi the 1%. But that's for another episode, right? So, isa lang yan sa mga nakaka-alarmang impormasyon na nagkalat sa internet while we're going through one of the most defining periods of our generation. But this is not an excuse to abandon reason. So, ito na. Ito pa ilang pa sa mga nakakadudang pahayag na naglipanan na kung saan-saan. And some of these involve like yung novel coronavirus was engineered in a lab in China, ganyan. Wag ka kumain sa Chinese restaurants. Zandi, naalala mo ba ng mga times na parang pati yung Chowking pinagdududahan nila dahil daw galing sa China yung COVID. Yun.
Ano
So
nga
I
ba?
was
I
saying,
wanna hear it again. Ano nga ba yung ibang nakakadudang pahayag
ayun,
na kung saan saan napupunta? Can you start from the beginning ulit? Parang gusto ko marinig ulit yun eh.
alright, alright. So, di ba parang sobrang dami nangyayari. And because of the coronavirus, so many misinformation have started to spread. And some of these are the novel coronavirus was engineered from a lab in China. And don't receive packages from China. Di ba? Ang dami sa Shopee, Lazada, most come from mainland China. And then yung sa Chinese restaurant, isa yun sa mga pinaka nakakatawa eh. Sa Chinese restaurants like Chowking and etc. Huwag ka daw kumain sa gano'n. Nakarinig ka na ba ng mga gano'ng misinformation, Zandy?
Yes, and it's heartbreaking kasi paborito ko yun. I love Chinese food, and this is
Yeah.
something that I don't want to let go of, if you know what I'm saying. But ano nga bang iba pang, news and disinformation that have spread because of the coronavirus?
Some I remember some of the news misinformation that really spread. Talaga nag-viral talaga was about the ivermectin. Yung gamot daw
Yeah,
siya sa COVID. Gamot daw siya sa
yeah.
COVID. So if you have COVID, just drink ivermectin. When in fact, it's for dogs. It's not for humans, right?
Yeah, and it can get dangerous talaga, especially if there's no, again, kanina we talked about it, kung walang maayos na source for medicine na ganito. Meron pang isa, yung bakuna daw na may microchip
Mm.
surveillance.
Nako.
Did you see those TikTok videos na yung spoon daw
Yeah.
dumidikit sa, yeah.
Mm. Parang may magnet pa because it's
Oo.
obvious daw na may microchip sa mga bakuna natin. So there have been so many anti-vaxxers because of fake news. And imagine kung hindi lang kumalat yung mga ganung balita, imagine how much easier it would have been for us and how much faster the herd immunity would have come if not because of these fake news, right? Right, Zandy?
Yes, and of course, even after all of that, after 6 million plus COVID deaths later, nariyan pa rin yung kapitbahay mong nagsasabing di raw totoo yung COVID kasi hanggang ngayon naman daw di pa rin siya nagkakasakit. So, you know what? I
Mm-mm.
think it's time for us to stop looking at 6 million deaths as mere numbers on the newspaper. We have to ask, let's visualize 6 million. Bakit hanggang ngayon sobrang rampant pa rin ng disinformation na ganito?
And imagine, in those 6 million, even when just one person leaves us, the impact that they leave is so big. So imagine 6 million around the world. And you know what? In 2020, Facebook also removed a network of accounts using false identities or trolls, and which were found to have links to the Philippine military or police. Oh, di ba? So if the government is taking part in the disinformation or the proliferation of unneeded discourse in this critical time, it is simply unnecessary, or better yet, evil, right?
And 6 million, that's 1/10 of our voting population. And on a national scale, can you imagine? It's so hard to look at that number and realize that there are people behind that number. These are mothers, these are children, these are fathers, these are people that we love, and that's a large chunk of our national population. Katkat may be coming on to something here. According to the new edition of the DSM, released with a new inclusion called prolonged grief disorder, to describe one's emotional and mental state when one experiences a bout or a continued bout of extreme grief. We've been surrounded by death for 2 years. And
Mm-hmm.
it's of no surprise some of us have been affected worse than others have.
Yes, so para sa mga nagsasabi dyan na wala talaga yung mga marites na hindi totoo ang COVID because they weren't affected, they just don't know the weight that it brought, the weight the pandemic brought, and how much it affected and changed all of us, right? It's
Yeah.
not just staying in your room and staying at home. It goes beyond that. And some people don't get the bigger picture. So, minsan talaga, mapakamot ulo ka na lang eh. Pero guys, kalma. Tayo-tayo lang to, okay? Tayo-tayo lang to. So, nagdulot ang pandemyang ito ng lungkot, takot, pagkataranta, at pagkawatak-watak. Kaya naman, now, more than ever, we need to seek and uphold the truth.
Ayun. So, w- coming into this topic also, it's nice to ask, should we diagnose everyone with the newly minted disorder? Because there's another piece of medical disinformation we need to talk about. As we discuss more about mental health, make sure that you have and are given access to mental health services so that you are
Yes.
diagnosed and, of course, treated properly.
Yes, especially now in the pandemic, right? Our mental health, the pandemic really brought a toll to our mental health, and it's been very hard. I'm sure for all of us, some just not aware, but for all of us talaga. And I don't know about the end of the world, but I hope that this will be the beginning of the end of misinformation. That it is the end of this transmission, kasi super super hirap niya and makes everything so much more worse.
Ayun. So, yun na bang end ng letter ni Katkat? Na parang, she ends it as well with saying na, I hope this will be the beginning of the end of misinformation. As we recognize that. As we recognize that just because some other people, go through stuff differently, that doesn't mean that, I'm like, they're not going through that as well. So, end of transmission na daw. Oh, wow. As we learn more about this information, we learn a little bit more about our mysterious letter sender. Balang araw malalaman din ng mga tao kung sino ka, Katkat. We will find out who you are as sleuths. Meanwhile, here are some guidelines on how to spot and address disinformation online and in our community. Number 1, keep critical. While today's culture of conspiracy is fueled by a long and brutal campaign to discredit our mainstream information providers, there is something essential we must extract and bring to light in this new practice. Always remain critical of the information you receive, okay? Check your sources. Hindi lang dapat
Yes.
CPPO yan, sabi natin kanina. And also, as well as your sources' sources. Kasi marami pa yun, di ba?
Yes.
It's like it's
Yeah.
impregnated with different sources. Now,
Mhm.
the question is, Migo, is bias bad? Right? Is bias bad? Should all reports be balanced? Well, it's a complicated discussion, but there are no perfect sources. Differentiate, make sure if you want to be critical, make sure you can differentiate between primary sources from while the event was happening and after the event happened, and tertiary sources written with accounts of the event. So be critical, about whether it's happening during the event or after the event has occurred.
Right, you got that right, Zandy. Talagang sobrang importante that we become critical, especially in these times in social media that so many fake news and misinformation talagang kumakalat everywhere. So we must always fact check, like always fact check, so that we can be sure that the information that we share out to our audience, to our news feed is correct. So now we have the second one. We have the 3Ds. 3Ds mean discredit and the platform disinformation. So disinformation peddlers have to be neutralized. If in social media, refrain from giving them any traffic or metrics, screenshot the disinformation and refrain from sharing, quote tweeting, liking, or even replying to them. Kasi it has been revealed that in many studies that social media algorithms cater strongly to disagreements and the polarization of people of opposing opinions. So, iwasan mag-away. Let's always go back to starting constructive conversations because when we fight, when we just argue with each other, wala tayong mararating eh. All that we have is just meaningless words, just throwing punchlines against each other, and at the end of the day, we really don't comprehend anything because ang naiisip lang natin is how right our opinions are, right? So this is all the more reason for us to start conversations on the ground without the help of the internet. Disinformation spreads into communities with impunity. So consider spreading materials that counter and discredit disinformation and strengthen the narrative of the truth. That leads us to our final tip for today. Zandy?
Yes. Our final tip actually is just one word. It says amplify. As people and as people who have different interests, we cannot claim to be experts in every field, nor do we want to. We cannot. It's physically impossible. Let's foster this culture of critical thought by sharing the truth in any way that we can. Again, once you are able to critically examine the sources of your sources, once you're able to discredit and deplatform this information, it's important that we are able to share those critical ideas and the truth to people. Again, like what Migo said, diba? Starting from the bottom up. Share it from the grassroots, share it to people on the ground, because our letter sender Katkat will be sharing materials you can share with your community on the ground.
Yes. Yes, you got that right, Zandy. So now, I mean, we've talked about all of these things, but probably a way to help our listeners for today is how can we fight disinformation in our own way? For example, as us, as hosts, how can we help them? Anong, anong action natin so that we can prevent disinformation? I personally, I believe that we should, other than fact checking, we should join groups that fight disinformation. Ito yung mga could be organizations, could be media, and samahan tayo mag-check natin yung mga information that we absorb. And let's make sure na bago natin i-share, you make sure that it's true first. How about you? What do you think?
That's great. I think that groups, sometimes we can learn in groups. It becomes something common,
Yes.
something we share. And I think something that's shared is a lot more powerful than something you do alone. And so on that, I think that I'm just gonna bounce off what you said. Two things. First is to use our platform, and
Mm.
second is to set an example. Right? We have this,
Yes.
for example, we have a
Beautiful.
platform as important as this. But like now, you, Migo, and I, we're talking about disinformation, and I think in our own simple ways, and also with Now You Vote, we're able to share that and let people be aware of critical thinking, of amplifying, of discrediting sources that aren't good, but also setting an example, because we
Mm-hmm.
have to recognize that sometimes, diba, Migo, we're not always right. Right, parang sometimes may mga points tayo na people will give us different points of views, and we're like, oh, that's right. So I think as people, as students as well, we have to accept that minds can change, and we have to set that
Mm-hmm.
example to other people as well.
I love that. I love that we should be an example to the people, especially with social media. Everyone has an
Yeah.
influence. No matter how low key you are, you have an influence with the people that you engage with, and most likely people will believe what you share, especially when you have a good background, right? So we need to be very cautious with what we share. So it's important that we set an example.
Exactly. And now that we have Katkat's letter, we've read through Katkat's letter, we have to realize na pawang mga letra lamang si Katkat, right? These are letters. At
Yes.
kami, we are the voice. We are the voice that is sharing, like, we're the voices sharing what's inside this letter. But kayo magiging kinatawan ni Katkat at namin sa pagsusulong ng katotohanan sa ating komunidad. That's why we are counting on you, our dear listeners.
Yes, guys. So now we are now at the tail end of our discussion. And while we're closing our episode for today, may paunting plug portions din muna tayo. But before that, just want to say that thank you for listening, and I hope that you guys learned, especially with Kat's letter, and meron kayong natutunan that will really give you a call to action, especially with the information that we share. So, as for my plug, hi guys, again, it's Migo. Please do catch me and support me at my podcast. I have my own podcast where I talk about self-help and self-improvement. It's called Life on Pause. You can also find me on my socials, Instagram and TikTok at Migo Austria.
Yes, thank you so much, Migo. And of course, for me, but anyway, again, just going back to it, Life on Pause by Migo Austria, you guys. You should listen to it. I think that I have also listened. I have listened to this podcast as well. And even found Migo on Instagram. I was like, and it's a great podcast. You guys should listen to it. On my end, naman,
Thank
you
you.
guys. Yes, it's a great podcast. On my end, you guys can follow me on Instagram. That's at Tomato. And if you guys have a Goodreads account, it's the same account that's at Tomato. So that's for Instagram. You guys should follow me and Migo throughout. UP
And
fight.
also, and also, guys, you should also support Zandy. She is a UAAP correspondent, and you'll be seeing her on TV. So it's an honor to be hosting with the UAAP correspondent. All right, so follow her as well. So, guys, this special episode series would not be possible if not for the vital support given to us by hashtag FactsFirstPH. Sabi nga ni Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Ressa, without facts, you can't have truth.
Exactly. And who will you vote for if you don't have the facts? How many times have you been attacked online because you challenged a lie? You're very strong for that. Good job, you guys. You are not alone, okay? We are together here to protect our elections and our democracy. We need to protect the facts.
Yes, ako mismo, I have first-hand experience with that. I've been trying to give them yung mga fact-check sources, and they only end up with saying na ano yan, na it's biased and it's not true, and their opinions are always right. So guys, join more than 100 groups, coalitions, media, civil society organizations, business groups, the church, research groups, and legal organizations that are working together around a first of its kind initiative called hashtag FactsFirstPH.
Yes, hashtag FactsFirstPH brings together various sectors that are committed to promoting truth in the public space and extracting accountability from those who harm it with lies.
Ask us through our email address to know more about this network.
At ganon, you guys, we are definitely at the tail end. If this is the tail end, this is the very last fur at the end of that tail. We will see you out there. Join us in this series of episodes as we read each of Katkat's transmissions of truth.
Ngayong 2022, ang panawagan ng Now You Vote ay kabataan ang maririnig, katotohanan ang mananaig.
It's time to exchange your views and knowledge with your peers, engage your communities and candidates for a meaningful change beyond the ballot, and commit to your right to suffrage as your vote defines the Philippines of our generation and maybe the next.
Bukas na bukas ang aming online tanggapan for youth activation sessions and resources to help you make your big decisions and to nurture your important conversations. Email us at secretariat.nyv@gmail.com.
And like what Migo said a while ago, doing things in groups is very important. So you can also join our Discord server, makiugnay, makipagtalakay at magboto kasama ng inyong kapwa kabataan sa discord.gg/nowyouvotehub. Again, that's discord.gg/nowyouvotehub. This has been Zandy with Migo, reminding you to participate in 2022's most important conversations and to make your 2022's biggest decision on May 9, 2022. See you next episode.